How are you doing?
Hey, I am doing pretty darn well. It has been probably the nicest spring I can remember in Oregon, and it's been fantastic. But all things do come to an end, and we do have a period of rain that set in yesterday. But gosh, with all the sunshine we've had, I'm all right. I'm okay with the rain. It's a good thing. So I'm just feeling good. How are you?
Nice. I'm doing great. I actually had my first coaching sessions with my new company today, and it's just been great. These first couple of sessions showed me how well prepared they have us because several complicated things happened during them, and I knew exactly what to do during all of them. So that's great.
Oh, nice. Nothing like showing up feeling like, okay, I've got some tools in my tool bag.
Exactly. That's exactly, as a matter of fact, we use this illustration all the time at that job. That's exactly what it is. I feel like they have put together a very comprehensive tool belt, and they just strapped it on us and said, go for it. And now we know how to use it all, and it's great. So that feels really good. But I'm guessing you didn't call for tool instructions.
I did not. Not this time.
Okay,
No,
good.
actually, so I have an opportunity to preach here in a couple of weeks. And so I texted you earlier in the week and said, hey, can you help me prep this sermon? So I'm super excited to see what you've prepped and what you've come to this conversation with, because I honestly cannot wait to preach this, but it also means I can't wait to have a conversation about it in preparation for it.
Yeah, this passage is fascinating to me, and I'm so excited that you invited me into this sort of prepping process with you. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah. Yeah. So for our audience's sake, who may have skipped over the title, we are looking at Proverbs chapter 4, and I'm going to preach through the whole chapter. So that's 27 verses. It's quite a lot to get through. So I'm not going to be spending a ton of time on each verse, but this isn't the sort of passage that would require you, and in my opinion, to preach through every single verse. It's almost like a thought by thought kind of passage. But I intentionally did not do a ton of prep prior to this conversation, because I'm really curious how our conversation today will drive the prep that still remains to be done before I write this sermon. So,
Yeah.
If you don't mind, what I'd love to do is just briefly read through this for the audience's sake so that they know what it is we're going to be trying to talk about here. And then I'd love to just dive in and start hearing some of your thoughts.
Yeah, that sounds great. I'm super excited.
All right. So I'm going to read from the English Standard Version. This is Proverbs chapter 4. Hear, O sons, a father's instruction, and be attentive that you may gain insight. For I give you good precepts. Do not forsake my teaching. When I was a son with my father, tender, the only one in the sight of my mother, he taught me and said to me, let your heart hold fast my words, keep my commandments and live. Get wisdom, get insight. Do not forget and do not turn away from the words of my mouth. Do not forsake her and she will keep you. Love her and she will guard you. The beginning of wisdom is this: get wisdom. And whatever you get insight. Prize her highly and she will exalt you. She will honor you if you embrace her. She will place on your head a graceful garland. She will bestow on you a beautiful crown. Hear, my son, and accept my words, that the years of your life may be many. I have taught you the way of wisdom. I have led you in the paths of uprightness. When you walk, your step will not be hampered, and if you run, you will not stumble. Keep hold of instruction. Do not let go. Guard her, for she is your life. Do not enter the path of the wicked, and do not walk in the way of the evil. Avoid it. Don't go on it. Turn away from it and pass on. For they cannot sleep unless they have done wrong. They are robbed of sleep unless they have made someone stumble. For they eat the bread of wickedness and drink the wine of violence. But the path of the righteous is like the light of dawn, which shines brighter and brighter until full day. The way of the wicked is like deep darkness. They do not know over what they stumble. My son, be attentive to my words. Incline your ear to my sayings. Let them not escape your sight. Keep them within your heart. For they are life to those who find them and healing to all their flesh. Keep your heart with all vigilance, for from it flow the springs of life. Put away from you crooked speech and put devious talk far from you. Let your eyes look directly forward and your gaze be straight before you. Ponder the path of your feet, then all your ways will be sure. Do not swerve to the right or to the left. Turn your foot away from evil.
Ooh, what
So,
a message.
I know. So what are your initial reactions to this chapter?
Okay, I have a million thoughts, but I'm curious, what is the best way for us to kind of set this up to be helpful to you?
Yeah. So as I read this passage, I look at it, I'm really intrigued by the grandfather to son grandfather to dad to son relationship that it talks about. Like, this is multi-generational discipleship, passing on wisdom from generation to generation. And so I'm thinking a lot about the intergenerational nature of this. And I'm realizing that in some ways there's not a lot of meat here. There's not a lot of like very clear, do this, do not do this. It's a lot more of like, make wisdom a priority, get it at all costs. But there's not a lot of how embedded here. And so how to do what the author is encouraging us to do, I think might need some extra help. And so I guess my thought is there's a lot in this passage that I'm really drawn to. The intergenerational stuff, the importance of wisdom, the prudence of having wisdom and what effect it will have on your life. All of that is here, but not the how. And so I'm thinking, like, one, how would you set this up? What kind of introduction? Maybe we can get to that after we talk about some of the meat here. And then I'm really curious at the end, like, how would you apply this? How would you bring out the how for the audience? My initial idea is to just say, let's take a brief tour of the Bible of what it says. Like, here are 7 marks of a wise life as given by the Bible, and just pull various other references from throughout the Bible, particularly Proverbs, that show what a wise life looks like. And so maybe that is the application. Maybe the application is this intergenerational discipleship idea. I'm not sure. So anyway, those are some of my initial thoughts, and I would really love to flesh all of that out more clearly.
I love that. It's very interesting. The two biggest things. So the way I often start off in a conversation like this is I will print out the text on paper so that I can write all over it, but it's only on the right-hand side of the paper so that I'm left-handed, so I can write on the left. I have a giant left-hand margin. And the first thing I have in giant letters is godly heritage, underlined 3 times.
Yes.
And the last thing, and I actually think there's an answer to this at the end, is the word how. And I think it offers an interesting, though not very specific how. So I love the fact that we're going to end with the how question, because I think there's an interesting idea there. I'm curious if I can start off by just asking a couple of questions about things that I think were odd and see your take on those things.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. So I don't know that any of these are important or not important, but the first thing that caught my attention that I'm curious about is just the "Hear, O sons." I looked this up, and an address to a son happens over 20 times in Book of Proverbs, only 4 of which are plural. and they are in 4, 5, 7, and 8. This is one of the very few plurals. And I have no idea what that means. I was just like, huh, that's weird. It's never plural.
Yeah. Well,
So,
so in my study, I was reading Waltke's commentary here, and Waltke suggests that sons is a way of taking this out of the specific relationship of the author and his parent and his child, and putting it much more in the generic sense of, hey, sons, hey, boys, listen up, listen to your dad's instruction. And so it's genericizing by using the plural, which, sure, I mean, Waltke knows way more than I do. Until somebody else comes up with an argument, I'll take that one.
well, and this makes sense. Putting aside my other question for a moment, this actually makes a lot of sense to me because this feels like a continuation of heritage that began very, very early on. This feels like when I was reading this, the things that are coming to my mind are, first of all, Deuteronomy 6. So Deuteronomy 6, the Shema, the next verses after the hero Israel of the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, strength. I think I just quoted the New Testament. Heart, soul, and might. It says, "You shall these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise," and on it goes. But there's this interesting theme in Deuteronomy that is God has given the law, and now it needs to be passed from generation to generation, and not just the law in the sense of like the Ten Commandments, though it's hard. The other thing that I thought was interesting about this passage in Proverbs, somewhere somebody noted that it was broken into 10 poems, probably intentionally to sort of mirror the Ten Commandments, these first 8 chapters or whatever. So there's this clear sort of echoing of the law, right? But he's saying, so this makes sense of the genericness of, or genericizing of it. Hey, like, we've been passing this along for what, hundreds of years now? And it came to me and I'm giving it to you. Like, when I was 20, I would have been like, yeah, that's awesome. At 45 with kids, the beauty of wisdom that has been passed down from generation to generation is genuinely inspiring to me.
Yeah, I love that. You're right. It is inspiring. And I love the idea of going all the way back to the Shema and how this has been generations upon generations of how Israelites have passed down the teaching of God. And I see that even showing up in the New Testament. You know, Paul says in 2 Timothy 2:2, "And what you have heard from me in the presence of many witnesses, entrust to faithful men who will be able to teach others also." Take what I have spoken, give it to faithful men who will be able to pass it on yet again. And you see, so I think in the Old Testament, this place of learning, this multi-generational discipleship was very much centered around the home. And I think even the New Testament shows that to be true as well. But there's a sense also in the New Testament of the way that the church also embodies that same role of making sure to pass down this message from generation to generation.
Yeah. Well, and part of what this says to me is that very counterculturally, we need to trust wisdom because it's old. Right? Like, when I think about this, sometimes, people say about the Bible, well, it's so many generations ago. How do you know it really what it says is really what happened. And one of the answers that we give is because it's changed lives for generations. This wisdom has proven true in life after life after life after life after life. And when you try to take a stand against it because you think you've come up with some clever new idea, it has been tested across generations, across continents, across eras, across cultures. This wisdom is proven in a way that is profound. And yet we are so dismissive of in our 21st century postmodernity.
Right. Well, and I think you see even some of that pleading going on in this passage. Like, I know you might be tempted to listen to other voices and think that you know better, but please listen. And it's interesting. I mean, so you mentioned Deuteronomy 6 and the Shema. The Shema gets its name because the very first word of that is the Hebrew word Shema, which means hear or listen. And it's the very first word of this proverb or this chapter of Proverbs as well. Hear, listen. And hear and listen to your father's instruction. Be attentive that you may gain insight, for I give you good precepts. In other words, listen up. I'm giving you the good stuff here. Don't think you're going to find the good stuff somewhere else. It's right here if only you will listen and pay attention to the same wisdom that my father gave me. There's a pleading and a please don't go somewhere else for this. I've got it right here.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and what I love, this idea of wisdom, often I think we have to pause and ask, what do we mean by it? As a matter of fact, we almost got into this in our last conversation last week. When you think of wisdom, what does that word mean to you, particularly in this context?
Well, it's so interesting to me that last week we talked about listening and nearly got into a conversation about wisdom. And this week, when you ask me what is wisdom, I really start thinking about listening. It's interesting in my own life that the better I have become at listening, the more people have accused me of being wise. And I think wisdom, and I think you've said this so many times on the podcast, wisdom is learning when not to speak. And I think sometimes we think of wisdom as having good, important things to dispense to somebody. But knowing when to speak and when not to speak feels to me like the very crux of wisdom.
Yeah, which I think when we get down to verse 24, it's interesting to me that the one concrete way of gaining wisdom, he says, is put away crooked speech. Just stop with all the broken words. And I think all the other things he says are nowhere near that concrete, right? Like the next verse is let your eyes look directly forward and your gaze be straight before you. That's a metaphor. The next one is ponder the path of your feet. That's a metaphor. Do not swerve to the right or to the left. That's a metaphor. But put away from you crooked speech. That is not a metaphor. I do not think. I think he literally means stop saying things you shouldn't be saying. Just be quiet. Right?
Yeah. Right.
And I think you're right. It's a huge part of learning wisdom to know when and how to use your mouth. I almost said the beginning of wisdom is learning how to speak. But this brings me to my second question. I have so many other thoughts about wisdom, but I want to throw in, as we're talking about what is wisdom, did anything strike you as odd about the beginning of wisdom is this, get wisdom?
Oh my gosh, yes. Because so many other times in Scripture, the beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord. or the fear of the Lord is the
Yes.
beginning of wisdom. You hear that all the time. And so when you get into verse 5 here and it's, or wait, is that where it is? Oh,
Verse.
7.
Where'd it go? 7.
Yeah. The beginning of wisdom is this: get wisdom. And whatever you get insight. And it's like, wait, the beginning of wisdom is going after and getting it? Like, and so by the way, that get word I learned from Walt Key is a marketplace word. It means to purchase. And because later he's talking about lady wisdom and how he doesn't say lady wisdom in this, but wisdom is personified as a she who will take care of you. He suggests, and other commentators suggest, that what we're talking about when we talk about purchasing or getting is paying a dowry. In other words, make wisdom your bride and give up whatever dowry you have to give up to secure her as your bride. And which very well may be, but either way, purchase wisdom is really what that's saying. Get wisdom. And I'm like, wow, that's the beginning of wisdom, is to purchase wisdom?
No,
That feels circular.
it does make sense to me, though. I have known plenty of people who wanted wisdom but weren't willing to pay for it.
Yeah.
And none of them had wisdom.
So I had
There is
actually thought, go ahead.
I was just going to say, there is something true, though it doesn't answer the question of why it's not the fear of the Lord, but there is something true to me about coming to a point where you are willing to pay for it. That is, in fact, the beginning of gaining wisdom.
Yeah, there's something that rings true for me as well. In fact, I was thinking about making this a major part of my sermon, and I had started thinking through the answer to this question, but I'd love to pose it to you. What are some of the costs? What might you have to pay? What's the asking price for wisdom?
The first thing that comes to mind, and this actually may unify the two answers to the beginning of wisdom, is fearing God and seeking wisdom. Both are signs of humility. I think that there is an ego loss that begins this journey where you have to say, I don't know, I can't, I am not wise. Right? I think that is the first and largest cost, is acknowledging you don't have it. And all of the hurt, shame, loss, pain, confusion, disorientation, whatever that comes with that. What do you think about that as a beginning of an answer?
Well, I think that's awesome, because we all intuitively go through this motion. So yesterday was Mother's Day, and we one of the things that we did was go thrifting. It's one of our favorite things to do, is just walk around thrift stores. And while we were going, my wife said, "Oh, while we're out, I need to start looking for a mug. I know I have lots of mugs at home, but I just started a new job and everybody there has a mug that they keep at work." She's like, "So I need a mug that is specific to my work life and what, so let's keep an eye out for that." And what she was acknowledging without saying is, I don't have a mug that does what I want it to do for work purposes. I lack something. I need to go buy it. And I think you're exactly right at acknowledging our own personal lack. If we're willing to go pay money, and not just thrift store money, but like a dowry money to get wisdom, we're acknowledging this is really valuable and I don't yet have it. I think that's an important first step.
Yeah, I think it is too. That, and I think maybe the next thing is hard work and sweat equity. You do not gain wisdom easily, right? Like it's compared to, in one of the other chapters in this beginning of Proverbs, to a hidden treasure, right? Like you have to go mine it. You have to dig into scripture. You have to read a lot. You have to think deeply. You have to, I think we actually will get to the how. And I don't want to get too much into that yet because I think that there's some interesting thoughts there and we can get there at the end, but you have to do a lot of work. It doesn't, people don't automatically become wise as if by magic.
Right. Right. Well, and I even see that playing out later in the passage where he compares the path of the righteous versus the path of the wicked. And he says in verse 19, the way of the wicked is like deep darkness. They don't know over what they stumble. That's what you get by accident, right? Wisdom doesn't come by accident. You stumble in the darkness when you live by accident. And so, yeah, I think you're right. A lot of hard work and sweat equity. But I want to draw out something in my sermon, and let me run it by you here. I think we as Americans are very familiar with the concept of hard work and sweat equity. That feels right in our bones and in our DNA. But there's something that I think wisdom requires that we are less comfortable with. And that is patience and silence. And like we talked about last week, a corollary to patience and silence is listening. And I think this quiet, meditative, open palms in your lap posture that you described last week, that to me is a part of seeking wisdom because it's great. I've filled my head with information. I have received information. Now I have to do the hard work of waiting and listening for insight into the information that I've been given. How does that strike you as a part of this sweat equity motif?
I think you're exactly right. This idea of waiting, I think, captures several things that are in these last couple of verses that I think really do speak to the now. If I'm patiently waiting, I'm not scanning the horizon for the next possibility. I'm not frantically looking. I'm just able to do what it says and let my eyes look directly forward. Right? There is something about accepting the waiting, that you accepting the part of the process and the journey that you're in, willing to be patient when you are just taking the next step. You're not looking for another option. You're not, I always think of folks who like to take shortcuts, and they take 57 shortcuts to get there when they probably should have just kept going.
Yeah.
Right. And these verses really seem to say there are going to be a million opportunities for shortcuts, but the patience that you're describing that wisdom requires is recognizing that shortcuts are really short circuits. And what we really need to do is just choose the long way for the sake of the fact that the long way is the only way to get the wisdom.
That's a really good interpretation of that verse 26. Ponder the path of your feet, then all your ways will be sure. This is the long road, and I'm just not going to deviate to these shortcuts because I know the long road will get me there, and I'm not anxious about how long it takes.
Exactly. But just in case we think I'm foolishly just trudging along and haven't been self-reflective, I am pondering the path, even as my eyes are forward. I'm attentive to the fact that I am on a path, and I am very carefully being reflective about the journey that I'm taking. So even if I'm in a receptive posture, I am not in a passive posture. Does that distinction make sense?
Yeah, 100%. My analogy to that would be at night, sometimes my kids come home late because they're teenagers or young adults, and my wife will actively wait up for them to make sure that they are okay. And sometimes that means checking Life 360 to see when they might be on their way or how the drive is going. But either way, it is actively staying awake and in the living room where they're going to have to pass through so she can ask them about their day. Meanwhile, I am fast asleep because I got to get up early in the morning, and I'm glad she can do that because I cannot. And so I am very passively awaiting their arrival. I will get up the next morning and I will check the driveway, and if their car is there, I will assume they made it home safely. That is a very passive awaiting of their arrival, whereas she's actively awaiting the arrival. And so, yes, both of us receive the message of, yes, our kid arrived home safely, but one of us did so actively.
Yeah. Well, and that waiting in that sense, I do think there's an invitation here to sort of look in the rearview mirror instead of thinking, oh, I got to do this, I got to do that, blah, 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 like I got to rush, I got to just taking the time to process each step of the journey before I take the next step. This sort of self-reflection that I don't remember if I've said this on the podcast or not, but several of the books I've read recently, their primary argument has been that Christians who read the Bible and pray consistently, but don't reflect on their own lives consistently, probably are not following Jesus well.
Sure.
And I think there's a piece of that here too. Like,
yeah, pondering the path of your feet.
Yeah, like there needs to be the practice of receiving wisdom, but then, to put this in a kind of very modern kind of comparison, if you are going to follow the GPS directions in your car, you need to pay attention to where you are and where the directions want you to be, and when you're on course and when you're off course. And if you aren't paying attention to when you're off course, you can affirm the directions all day long and it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Well, okay, so this all makes me think about the two paths that he talks about a lot here. He talks about the path of the righteous. He talks about the path of the wicked. He talks about not straying from the path of the righteous, not straying from these instructions, not straying from wisdom. And he does a lot of comparison here. So I wonder if you had thoughts about any of that, what he's driving at, how it spoke to you, whatever.
Yeah, one of my first thoughts is I think that he shows in his reference to these two paths the ways in which he has done the thing he is inviting his son to do. The imagery of there being two paths, the way of the righteous and the way of the wicked, this is laced through the entire Old Testament. It's deeply embedded in the Psalms. The Psalms actually introduce themselves with Psalm 1, which kind of has some resonance to this idea. It's deeply embedded in the law. The poet here is taking a long-standing idea that is commonly held to be true and presenting it to his son or to his sons, to the, hey guys, listen up crowd, in this fresh way. And I love the fact that he's not trying to be original in the way he delivers it. It's a fresh take on a very old idea that, like, it's okay. He's not trying to be creative. Not in this moment. In this moment, he's trying to honor the past. And I think this... Go ahead.
It makes me actually think of Andrew Peterson's song that I think he wrote for a graduating son, maybe not, but that's how I interpret it. Have you ever heard him sing "Stick to the Old Roads"?
It is written in the header of my page today.
Are you serious?
Yes, it says Peterson. I couldn't remember the exact wording, but it says Peterson, Old Roads.
Yes.
I think you introduced me to this song, by the way.
Oh, I bet I did, because I just love it. Yeah. His advice to his son is stick to the old roads and you will find your way. And he's talking about how
Mhm.
all the ways that life will get challenging and confusing, and all the things that we know as mid-40s people looking at a graduating high schooler. And we know how confusing and wild life is going to be. And the advice is, no matter what you're facing along the way, stick to the old roads and you will find your way. It's so
Yeah,
good.
so good. And I do think that is both the emotional tone of that song, which is there is a loving pleading that is happening in that song. Like, boy, I care so much about you, and you have no idea the potholes you can drive through if you don't listen here, but just please stick to this. Not begging on any level. There is a comfort and there's a sense of self that would not necessarily allow pleading, but there is a confidence and a love that I see in that or hear in that song that I hear in this text. It's so passionate.
Yeah. Well, hey, we are getting a little short on time. So I want to ask 3 remaining questions in what time we have left. My 3 questions are these. 1, what else do you really want to get to that I haven't asked you about yet? 2, do you have any thoughts on how you would introduce this sermon? What would be a good introduction? And 3, how would you apply this sermon? So I know that's a lot in our remaining time, but those are my 3 outstanding questions.
So number 1 is just a generic. Is there anything else? Let's skip that one. I think we got a lot of the main themes here.
Okay.
So what was question number 2?
Introduction. How would you introduce this?
As I wrestle with that, what is, and this might change 10 times before you preach, but what's the big takeaway that you want your people to walk away with?
I think, again, like you said, I'm willing for this to change, but this intergenerational idea is exactly what I want to key in on. I don't care if you're 5 or if you're 85, the pursuit of wisdom and the intentional passing down and receiving of it is wildly important. Sell everything you have to make it happen. How do you do that? You want it more than anything and you're willing to pay the price. I think is where I'm going with the sermon.
I love that. And it really, the image in my head, and there needs to be a more positive version of this, but links in a chain, right? When you hold on to this wisdom, you don't just hold it for you, you actually are holding it for the generations to come after you. That if you break the chain, they miss out.
Mm.
And that's powerful. But I think that's the question is, how do you create that sort of mental imagery in people's minds with the emotional undertone that we've been describing, like in Andrew Peterson's song? Do you think it's a story? Are you looking for something like physical that you can use as an illustration? Is it a picture on the screen?
Mm. You know, it's interesting. I wonder if I can play with this a little bit. Your links in a chain made me think of, the guy dependent upon that chain way down below, literally falling because the chain broke. And it made me think of my son, who is an apprentice tree trimmer, and how he has a rope for everything. And you use certain ropes for certain things. And particularly when you're climbing, you have to have a climbing certified rope. Otherwise, it could break and you could die. And there are certain ropes that are rated for that. But then not only that, the rope itself has to be inspected for any wear that you can see and sometimes wear that you cannot see. And you have to make sure that it's solid. every single time you go to use it, you have to check that rope and you have to make sure it's good and sound. And so I'm thinking of how the author presents this sound advice and says, no, really, this is life-sustaining rope here. Check it. I've checked it. My dad checked it. His dad checked it. It has held us and it'll hold you. I wonder if that might make some sort of an illustration.
Ooh. I tell you what, if you had, I mean, depending on how theatrical you want to be with this, but if you got rid of the pulpit and you were just sitting in like a high top, knowing what you want to preach, if you could get it all in your head, and the whole time you start off with an illustration of checking the rope, the whole time you're talking, you're just working the rope through your hands as you talk. And you're just slowly but surely working rope through your hands and talking as you talk about all the various things that this rope is. I think you've got a really potentially powerful image there.
Yeah. Okay. I like that for an introduction. And in our last few minutes, how would you apply this?
You know, the 4 things at the end, I think are which of these 4 do you need to work on? 24, 25, 26, and 27. Do you need to put away crooked speech? Do you need to let your eyes look forward? What are you paying attention to? Do you need to ponder the path? What are you reflecting on? Or do you need to not swerve? What's distracting you? What are the compromises you need to let go of? Those, to me, feel like the application of this. Those kind of 4 things.
Boy, I like the way you reframed each of those. Wow. Man, I feel like this went a long, long way to writing my sermon today. I imagine if anybody ever compares this conversation to the sermon, they're going to find them wildly similar. I haven't written it yet, so we'll see. But boy, am I inspired to write this.
I'm excited to hear it. Make sure you send the link when you actually preach it.
Yeah, I will. And honestly, it may be that I preach the sermon before this actually goes live to the audience. So I might be able to include it in the footnotes. We'll see.
Ooh, bonus episode.
Yeah. Well, hey, I would love to turn to the audience and, just invite them to weigh in on this idea of wisdom. How do you know the wisdom you've received is sound? How have you had to pay the cost of acquiring wisdom? And in what areas of gaining wisdom do you want to grow? We would love to hear from you.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I can't even add anything to that. That is exactly what I would love to hear. Please, please, please share, because we are very curious.
Yeah. As always, you can reach us on Facebook, on Instagram, and on Threads, and you can write to us at onthephonewithjosh@gmail.com.
Oh, man. Thank you so much for pulling me into this conversation. I was realizing how much I love digging into scripture in this way, even as I was getting ready for the conversation. So it's such a privilege. And I can't wait for our conversation next week.
Yeah, me too. All right. I will talk to you then.
All right. Talk to you then.
Bye-bye.
Bye.